Hey, boys and girls. The objective of today's lesson is to learn about copyright rules and to identify ways to use others' creative ideas properly. So at the end of the lesson, you should be able to say, I can define copyright. I can also tell you ways to properly use someone else's creative idea within my own. So today we're going to discuss what copyright is. We're going to go over a super quick history of copyright law, what content is typically the copyright law protects. We're going to briefly talk about a consequence for breaking this law. Then we're going to talk about what copyright looks like for us elementary students in a school setting. And we will also touch on something called fair use and how that pertains to copyright. Okay, so what is copyright? Copyright was created to protect people from having their creative works used without their permission. It gives legal rights to the original owner. That means the person that created it, the person that came up with it and put it down. This means that you own the things that you do or create. For example, while you're sitting here in school, if you write a song just on your piece of paper on your desk, and then someone grabs that song and takes it and they perform it on their Instagram and they get a whole bunch of attention and followers and likes, and maybe they get paid to do an ad, all of that is the wrong thing to do, and they are breaking a copyright law. They didn't seek your permission as the person that originally did it. They didn't pay you for it to use your original work. So they broke a copyright law. The most common place, guys, that you have come in contact with something like this is probably when you're trying to create some of your awesome content on YouTube. And maybe you really love this brand new song that's out on the radio and you try to use that song within your video. And YouTube does this really big exclamation mark and says, no, that's you don't have permission to use that song. That's an example of where we would see copyright pretty frequently. I know I've seen it in the own stuff that I've tried to do before I was aware of what copyright was. So copyright also sets conditions for borrowing someone's creative work. That means that it tells you the things that the rules that you have to follow, like the specific rules, anytime you are creating something of your own that includes someone else's work in it. It kind of gives you a step-by-step of what to do. And then finally, copyright also allows owners to benefit from the use of their product. This means that if the creator of the original work, like you with that song, if you want, you can request money. If you want to use my song, you need to pay me. Or you just request them to say or write that you were the creator of the original song so that you get the followers, the attention, the money, but mostly the credit for that original piece of work. And it shows that the person that took it from you isn't the one that created it, it was you. So they are giving you credit in their work. So it's kind of cool to know the history of where something comes from. So I'm going to do a really brief history of copyright laws. So you can see from my timeline that the first copyright law, according to the U.S. Copyright Office, was actually included in the U.S. Constitution. But it was pretty limited as to what it protected, because back in the 18th century, we didn't have music on the radio or movies. So what it originally protected was books, maps, and charts. And then you can kind of see as time passed that we had to pivot our law to cover many different types of content. And this is going to continue to occur as humans continue to advance in our creativity and our technology. Do you think that the founding fathers back in the 18th century could have ever guessed that there would be a motion picture one day that would require protection? And for those of you that don't know, a motion picture can be the movies. Some of the most common copyright content that we deal with, especially in the school settings, are included on this slide here. Copyright law is not limited to just these things. Again, these are just the most common content that tends to be used by students. So, first we have images, which is a common medium used by students in schools like visual arts, photography, and these are protected by copyright. It also includes paintings, sculptures, drawings, and photographs. Did you know that the Statue of Liberty even has a copyright? Another type of content is music. We talked about that earlier when you add it to YouTube. Music falls under performing arts and can be anything from lyrics to sound recordings. Literature is the next one. And this is one of the more common pieces of work that is used in schools. This work can explain, it can define or narrate, and it's usually intended to be read, but it doesn't have to be something that is intended to be read, but usually it is. And then finally, motion pictures. Motion pictures are defined as a series of related images that are intended to be displayed through a device like a projector. This could be a cartoon, a movie, or a video game. So these are common pieces of content that are protected under the copyright law that we will have to ask permission if we are going to use a certain amount of this, or really any of it, within our own creative body of work. So we're going to super quickly talk about the consequences that could occur if you used someone else's creative work, like the work that we talked about on the last slide. So some of the consequences that you could get for using someone else's work without their permission is legal action. You could pay really large fees as well if you didn't ask permission from the owner or pay the owner to use their work. So we've now established that you're not supposed to use other people's creative content without seeking permission. But there is a small gray area for that called fair use. There are some instances where we can use others' work without getting their permission. This fair use permits or allows others to use a copyrighted work without the owner's permission for purposes such as critiquing something. So if you're looking at someone's original work and you're leaving comments or you're talking about whether you like it or not, you may have to use their work within your work to show the things you liked and you didn't like. News reporting, teaching, scholarships, or research. Now, research is the big one that we use at school quite a bit. And actually, these are only examples of what might be considered as fair use. There's really no black or white. It's really a case by case. So it's always in our best benefit to seek permission before using someone else's content in our work. You don't often see specific copyright rules written within our school handbook, but you will see plagiarism. Plagiarism is not what we're specifically talking about today, but some of the ways to avoid plagiarizing are also some of the same exact requirements asked upon you when using someone else's creative work. Plagiarism is defined as using someone else's work without acknowledging them, but copyright is using someone else's work without permission. So for either of these, always make sure to cite your source. You may get special copyright permission as found in Creative Commons, which we'll talk about on the next slide. And it just simply asks you to cite where you got the picture from or the quote from. You may want to use some music. I would always cite my music, but also according to the fair use policy, you need to use less than 1 minute of that music, so a clip of it. Avoid copy pasting explicit, like entire pieces of work or entire paragraphs. Put things in your own words, but again, always cite your source. Where did you get that from? And then finally, when using a motion picture, just use a short clip instead of an entire movie.